นะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะ 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 พุทธังธัมมังสังฆังนะมาสามิ Last year, at the end of last year, when Ajahn Pasno and myself went walking on Tudong in India, one of the places that we visited on our pilgrimage was Rajgir. Rajgir is now a bustling town in Bihar province. It's about just over half the way between Patna, where we started our walk, and Bodh Gaya. And Rajgir is surrounded by a number of mountains, 5 famous peaks, and can still see today the remains of the old city wall and the Veluvanaram monastery, which was the first monastery ever established in the Buddhist religion. And then on top of the Vulture's Peak mountain, there's the the remains of the Buddhist Kuti. You still see the brick foundation, and it's a place of pilgrimage. And just close by there's a cave, which is said to be the cave where Venerable Sariputta was fully enlightened while standing the Buddha as he gave a discourse to Sariputta's uncle, Diganaka, or Long Nails, who was a follower of Sanjay Dalaputta, Sariputta's former teacher, who came to defeat the Buddha in debate. So the area is very strong and powerful feeling to it, and we spent the night right up on top of the mountain on Vulture's Peak. We had to sneak up there really because the police didn't want people to stay up on top. But we went up during the day and stayed there and just didn't come down in the evening. It was a very cold night, I remember, and very strong winds blowing up to the Vulture's Peak. Ajahn Pasno and I, we did the evening chanting together, and then we chanted the Paritas, and then sat meditation until late at night. It was a place I felt, the Vulture's Peak, where really the life story of the Buddha, the historical Buddha, really came alive more than anywhere else on our trip. Down in Veluvanaram, the bamboo grove is now like a small park in the middle of town, and really not very much left to remind one of the first monastery that was established there by King Bimbisara. At the time of the Buddha, Rajgir, or Rajagaha, it was called, was the center of a great kingdom of Magadha. And at the time, just after the Buddhist enlightenment, the king of Magadha, King Bimbisara, and on hearing a discourse from the Buddha quite shortly after the Buddha's enlightenment, King Bimbisara became a Sotapanna, attained the first level of enlightenment, what we call stream entry, completely freed himself from all views of self, no longer had any personality view, never considered any of the 5 khandhas of body, feelings, perceptions, thoughts, sense consciousness to be a self, and so completely freed himself of all doubts concerning the truth of the Buddha's Dhamma, and freed himself from all attachment to merely external observances. After that, King Bimbisara became one of the great disciples, lay disciples of the Buddha, and Veluvanarama and the mountains around Rajagir became a favourite place for Buddhist monks, and many of them were living in the various caves and quiet places in that area, and would come together perhaps on the Uposita day, on the full moon, the dark moon day, for the recitation of the Patimokkha and to listen to Dhamma from the Buddha. And many suttas in the Tripitaka refer to events that occurred in Rajagaha, on Vulture's Peak Mountain, or on talks given on other of the peaks in that area. King Bimbisara was a very, very pure and very devout man, and after some time his wife became pregnant, and he called in the astrologers, because although he was a Sotapanna, then it was the custom for kings to do such things, and the astrologers said that saw that the signs were very bad, and they said that this child would be an enemy of the king, even from while it was still in its mother's womb, and would eventually kill its father. So they took the name Ajata, which means unborn, as yet unborn, and Sattu, which means enemy, and so the child was called Ajatasattu, enemy while still in the womb. And when the queen had been pregnant for some time, she developed a strange desire. She felt a strong urge, impulse to drink the blood from her husband's right arm. And it was just such a horrible, terrible sort of desire which so shocked her, and so she felt so ashamed that she felt she couldn't tell anybody about it, and just kept it quiet. But as time went on, the urge was so strong and the tension was so great that she began to lose weight and become very pale and thin, and her husband began to be worried that something would happen to the child in the womb, and spoke to his wife and asked her what was wrong, and she wouldn't reply, and he tried various ways to persuade her to tell him what was on her mind, and she said, it's too horrible, it's too evil. But he said, it doesn't matter if you don't speak to your husband, if you can't get things off your mind by talking to your husband, then who could you ever talk to? So she said, I have a desire to drink the blood from your right arm. King Bimbisara said, well, what's so evil about that? That's not so bad, that's not so terrible. And he called one of his servants and bought a golden dagger and sat down and let the servant make an incision in his right arm, and there was a golden goblet. He caught the drops of blood from his arm and then mixed it with pure spring water and offered it to his wife to drink. After this, the queen became very anxious and worried about the predictions and decided to try to have an abortion. So when her husband was away, she went off into the forest and had a servant girl just trample on her belly. But it was unsuccessful. And she did this a number of times. And in every case she was unsuccessful. And the husband realized again that something was happening and questioned her about it. And she, full of guilt, confessed that she wanted to have an abortion, that she was afraid that the child would kill its father, which would be more than she could bear. But King Bimbisara said, "Don't be so foolish. You don't even know yet whether it's going to be a boy or a girl. If we as the rulers of this country were to do such a terrible thing, to murder an unborn child, then what sort of example would we give to our people? We can never do such a thing. It would be a terrible blot on our reputation and a terrible example to the general populace." So he persuaded her not to do anything more. Then afterwards, later on, she gave birth to the child, and naturally the love of a mother overcame her fear, and both parents began to dote on the child. The child grew up. He came into contact with Devadatta, and Devadatta was the evil cousin of the Buddha. At that time the Buddha was getting on in years, into his 70s, and Devadatta was plotting to try to take over the Sangha of monks. He saw Sariputta with many disciples, saw Moggallana with many disciples, saw Mahakassapa with many disciples, was very jealous, felt that he should be the one to run the Sangha. In the end, he decided to enlist the help of Ajatasattu, and the method he used was that of impressing Ajatasattu with psychic powers. The psychic powers are worldly attainments that even people with quite evil minds or not particularly wholesome minds, if they've developed their power of concentration, sufficient power of concentration, or if they have the paramis from previous lives, can attain the psychic powers and then can use them in unscrupulous ways. And this is what Devadatta did. Ajatasattu became greatly impressed, full of faith in Devadatta. And so Devadatta broached the plan whereby he would help or advise Ajatasattu how to kill his father, the king, take over the kingdom. And in return, Ajatasattu would help Devadatta to kill the Buddha, take over the Sangha of monks. Devadatta said that the life of human beings is very short, and that there was no saying that he would ever get a chance to be king. Perhaps he would die first, and he should seize his opportunity while he could. He eventually managed to persuade Ajatasattu. Ajatasattu took his sword and in the middle of the day went into the castle, or to the royal household. But as he walked into the royal household holding his sword, he became full of fear, anxiety, terror, and was arrested before he could kill his father, the king. He was carried, dragged in front of the king, and many of the advisors said that Ajatasattu should be executed, and Devadatta too, and all the monks who were followers of Devadatta. King Bimbisara said, then demoted all of his advisors who recommended that course of action, and promoted all those that opposed that course of action. And then he said to Ajatasattu, "Why do you want to kill me?" And Ajatasattu said, "I want your kingdom." So King Bimbisara said, "All right, take my kingdom." And he abdicated. After that, Ajatasattu had taken over the kingdom and decided to celebrate by having a war, and invaded King Pasenadi of Kosala, who was his uncle. And there was a bitter, protracted struggle, and a peace treaty was drawn up in which King Pasenadi's daughter, Vajira, was given in marriage to King Ajatasattu. At this time, Devadatta came to see Ajatasattu and said, "Where's your father?" He said, "Well, I'm just leaving him in peace. He's given me what I wanted." And he said, "How can you be so foolish? Do you think he's really going to let you get away with this? He's just waiting until you become heedless, and then he's going to kill you and take back the kingdom." So Ajatasattu believed Devadatta again, and he said, "But I know that I could never kill my father with a weapon." And Devadatta said, "Well, there are other ways to kill people." So Ajatasattu had his father arrested and thrown into a cell, and left him to starve to death. But he gave permission for his mother to visit his father. So his mother would cook rice and put it in a golden vessel and carry it into the cell on her hip and feed her husband. Then Ajatasattu would go to see whether his father was close to death yet, and saw him still healthy, and asked his father why that was. And his father told him, "Because your mother brings me food in a golden vessel on her hip." So Ajatasattu, angry, ordered the guards, "In future, don't let my mother carry in anything on her hip." So after that, the queen cooked food, put it in a golden vessel, and put it in a top knot, and went to visit her husband and fed him. Ajatasattu came to see whether his father was dying yet, still healthy. He said, "Why is that?" father told him. So he ordered the guard, "Don't let my mother enter my father's cell wearing her hair up in a top knot." So after that, the queen had a special pair of shoes made, golden shoes, and cooked rice and food and put the food in a special compartment in the shoes, and went to visit her husband and fed him. Ajatasattu went to visit his father, saw he wasn't yet dead or dying, asked him why, and his father told him. And Ajatasattu told the guard, "Don't let my mother into my father's cell with shoes on." So then the queen would bathe her body in scented water and then anoint herself with ghee and honey and molasses, and then would go into her husband's cell. King Bimbisara would lick her body, and then Ajatasattu would come, see his father still healthy, and ask why. And his father told him, and Ajatasattu became angry, and he told the guards, "Don't ever let my mother in to see my father again." And the queen was outside, and she started to wail and cry. She said, "Oh, husband Bimbisara, you let him live when I wanted to kill him. You've nurtured your own enemy. Now I'll never see you again. Oh, husband Bimbisara, if I've done anything to offend you, please forgive me." After that, King Bimbisara went without food, but he started to walk Jongkrom. King Bimbisara was a Sotapanna, and walking Jongkrom and gave rise to great joy, happiness in his heart, and his body became very radiant, and so he didn't need physical food. And Ajatasattu came and saw his father and asked him why he was so radiant, though he was receiving no food. His father said, "Because of the joy of walking Jongkrom." Ajatasattu went back to his household, called the barbers. He said, "Barbers, go to my father's cell, cut open his feet with razors, smear the wounds with oil and salt, and then roast his feet over smokeless coals." The barbers went to the cell. King Bimbisara saw the barbers and thought, "My son's finally relenting in his evil. He sent the barbers to give me a shave." 2 barbers came in and told King Bimbisara what they had to do. King Bimbisara said, "You should do what your king tells you to do." But they couldn't do it. They begged him to sit down and bowed to him, asked for his forgiveness first. And then they grabbed a foot each and cut open the feet with razors, smeared the wounds with oil and salt, and then roasted King Bimbisara's feet over smokeless coals. King Bimbisara inclined his mind towards the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. The pain was intense, and he died from the pain. Just as said, as a garland of flowers would wither on the terrace of a chedi. and King Bimbisara was reborn in the Deva realm. And that very day, King Bimbisara was killed. Queen Majira, Ajatasattu's wife, gave birth to a baby. The messengers from the cell going to inform the king of his father's death. The messengers going to inform the king of his son's birth met at the gate. They decided to give him the good news first. They said, "Sire, your wife has given birth to a beautiful young son." And the king became suffused, King Ajatasattu just became suffused with rapture and joy right through to his very bones. And suddenly he realized, this is what it means to be a father. This must be how my father feels towards me. And then he quickly shouted out to servants, quickly, go and release my father. Punish him no more." And the messenger said, "Sire, your father is dead." And the king started to sob and beat his breast, and humbly, solemnly went to receive the body of his father and to perform the funeral rites with all due pomp and ceremony. It said after that King Ajatasattu never had a night's sleep again. As soon as he closed his eyes, he had a feeling as if 100 spears were piercing his body. And in fact, King Ajatasattu's son later murdered his father. King Ajatasattu died in the same way that he gained his throne, in the same way that he killed his father. And that regicide went on for 5 generations, until the people of Magadha said, "This lineage of kings just killing each other, what use are they to us?" And so they killed the last king of that line. This is one of the stories from the time of the Buddha. King Ajatasattu features in a number of suttas towards the end of the Buddha's life, and the one where he finally goes to pay his respects to the Buddha after being involved in the plot to kill the Buddha, and just how his mind is obsessed with the evil thing that he's done. And they go at night time, many on elephants, so as not to disturb the Buddha and the monks with the sound of horses and chariots. They go quietly, and then they come into the monastery where there are over 1,000 bhikkhus sitting quietly. And Ajatasattu, instead of feeling inspired, is full of fear, and that they're planning to kill him. It's then that the Buddha teaches the Manjapala Sutta, which is the discourse on the fruits of the life of the recluse. It's a very powerful story of Ajatasattu. Having killed his father, he committed one of the 6 heinous crimes, the crimes for which there is no expiation in this life. And so after that crime, there was no way that Ajatasattu could listen to the Dhamma and to free himself from defilement. Those 6 terrible crimes are killing father, killing the mother, killing an arahant, shedding the Buddha's blood, creating a schism in the Sangha. You can see that karmically a great importance, or the strong karmic relations between parents and children, that it's of equal karmic significance to killing an arahant or to shedding the blood of the Buddha, and it's something from which no amends can be made. He said after death of the physical body, and there is inevitably a rebirth in hell. You can see that the power of defilement, just how blind one can be to goodness and purity. And you see in the Buddha's time, so many monks, so many nuns, lay people actually had opportunity to listen to the teachings of the Buddha, and yet were unable to accept them, or opposed them, or even became angry on hearing them. And that with Ajatasattu, this desire to be for power, desire to become something, is so strong that able to inflict the most horrible pain and torment on his own father. You see that when the mind is overcome by some strong desire, that one loses all sense of right and wrong, and all sense of balance. A very, very powerful example of that. And that even if one's living with a Buddha, or one's living with a fully enlightened teacher, or if all of the surrounding conditions are perfect, if one still is indulgent and still taking pleasure in the pleasant feelings that arise from indulging in defilement, then one doesn't see the Buddha, one doesn't see the teacher, and one's cut off from all those beneficial influences. So in the end, we're always on our own, in the sense that it's up to us whether we open up to Dhamma or we close ourselves off to it. And we can see once you close yourself off to Dhamma, close yourself off to truth, then you open yourself to falsity. And the characteristic of one who is separated from Dhamma is it loses all sense of conscience and scruple, and is one who's able to find a logic and reason, rationale, for the most awful of acts. The feeling of horror, or the feeling that one is doing something intrinsically evil, is one that we cannot stand too much suffering. So we always try to find some justification for our acts. And the nature of the mind is so tricky and so deceitful, which is why we have some objective standards. It's why we have our moral discipline, our sila. So we never let our actions and our speech sway too far away from the guidelines of our precepts. And there's something there, not something that any one person has created, but they're part of our discipline, which we've received, a part of our lineage through 2,500 years. And they bring us back to normality. This is what sila is called, the normal, the norm. So it cuts down on the opportunity for us to deceive ourselves. You see, well, after Ajatasattu had done those terrible things, the important point when he realized what he'd done, the moment when remorse arose, was when he was able to put himself in the place of the other person, when he realized what it is to be a father. And virtue in life is something which we don't just impose on ourselves or on other people, but virtue in Buddhist understanding comes from right understanding, right view, the ability to take ourselves out of ourselves, put ourselves in other people's shoes, trying to imagine or to sympathize, to empathize with other people. Then we realize that we don't desire suffering, we want to be happy, and everyone else is the same. It's such a simple truth, but one which has a major significance on the way that we act. If it's something that we can really impress upon ourselves. So that ability to empathize is one way of dispelling that strong sense of me and mine, which is the basis of defilement. And this is part of our meditation, constantly seeking to undermine that sense of self, a separate self-sense. Noticing, even in our daily life, those things which are ostensibly part of the training, how they can foster or intensify the sense of self. For instance, in the case of denigrating others, lifting oneself up, denigrating others, because we can do something that other people can't do, feeling frustrated with other people who don't do things the way that we think they should. So the thing that we come back to all the time is our sensitivity to a very close, profound awareness of this sense of me and mine, and how it manifests when it's weak and when it's strong, or when it's completely absent. And so it's a way of measuring our practice. And our attitude towards formal practice is a very important thing. Inevitably, we all meet obstructions in practice. Everyone has their own particular difficulty, perhaps their own cross to bear. Some people have a lot more difficulties than others, but there's no cause for comparison or to think that anyone's better than anybody else. But we tend to think that when we're running into obstacles or difficulties, that we're doing something wrong, or that there is some technique that we haven't yet mastered, or some esoteric secret to enable us to avoid these problems, or that there is somewhere some shortcut that we don't yet know. And so that causes agitation in the mind, sometimes a frenzied reading of books, one after the other, searching for the key and the way to free ourselves from the difficulties we're facing. Whereas in fact it's not so much that we don't know the technique. The actual technique of meditation is not so complex. But what's important is that we have right view, and we know the purpose of meditation. We're able to maintain the right positive sort of attitude towards it, not getting over-elated when the mind becomes peaceful, or depressed and sad when the mind is not peaceful, but willing to take the truth of things, or the way things are, moment by moment, as one's teacher. The peace is just peace, and agitation is just agitation, and they condition one another, just as boredom conditions excitement, and excitement conditions boredom, and all the other dualities that we can see. And just being humble and willing to be with the things that are arising in the present, not thinking it shouldn't be like this. My mind should be more peaceful. Or getting agitated and worried or anxious because the pansa's 10 days, 12 days into the pansa already, and I thought I was really going to get my samadhi together this pansa, and it's not happening. But just being patient with the way the mind is. That's the way it is. That's the way our mind is right now. And the moment you start thinking, well, I wish it wasn't this way, then you've already lost the path. If there's a lot of negativity, then have to learn to develop the metta meditation. There's a lot of sensual desire to develop the Asubha Kamatan meditation, developing the awareness of death. These are absolutely basic techniques for all Buddhists, not just monks. The Buddha actually recommended them for everyone. These are tools that one should have ready for use. they need a work and they need development. You need giving attention to, so that they can be used. Instead of always seeking external inspiration when you get low, looking for books or tapes to read, to listen to, learning how to inspire the mind with the meditation objects that the Buddha gave, reflection on the qualities of the Buddha, qualities of the Dhamma, qualities of the Sangha, the Anusati meditation, reflections on Nibbana, or reflections on one's sila, or on one's chaga, or renunciation, all very positive topics that give rise to a lot of joy, knowing how to create joy in the mind by reflecting in a wise way on wholesome subjects. But that we have to be able to supplement that with skillful means. The energy levels of the body are varying throughout the day, throughout the season. There's a change going on. So knowing how to reflect on that and to practice accordingly, not just mechanically applying a technique, because in that way meditation practice can become sila bhatta paramasa as well. It can just become a rite and ritual if one's doing it in a merely perfunctory way without giving life to it. The idea is wakefulness, being awake to life, being awake to our existence, giving life and vitality to each breath of our life. And when we feel that the breathing is too tranquilizing, that we need something more stimulating, and then to use one of the other meditations. Someone can use that in conjunction with the breathing. We can use the in-breath and the out-breath as the framework for a more reflective sort of practice, with the reflection on the elements or the khandhas or the ayatanas, all those objects or ways of developing wisdom. Knowing how to enjoy meditation. You should look forward to it and really find it the thing that you enjoy most in life. Nothing that one enjoys as much as formal meditation. If you don't enjoy it, then it means that your attitude towards it is not really mature yet. Is that if one has the right attitude, then one feels in time meditation that the mind in meditation is right. This is the right way. This is the natural, the most perfect way of being. There's a sense of rightness, correctness, appropriateness. And that's not only when the mind's peaceful, but even when it's encountering obstacles and difficulties. Well, it's been quite a few obstacles and difficulties in giving this talk this evening. There's the sound of the movie in the village and the frogs and toads. It's been hard to maintain much continuity, so I'll leave it for this evening. being self-sufficient.